Personal finance presentation. Options if denied credit. Prepare to get financially fit by practicing personal finance. We're now thinking about a situation in which we're denied credit. So in other words, we look for a loan, we look for financing from a financial institution. We're denied the loan or financing. What are the options at that point in time? So we may want to check your credit file at the credit bureau. The options then being you either believe that the reasons for denial are valid, you are not sure if the reasons for denial are valid or invalid, or you believe the reasons for credit denial are invalid and the creditor has discriminated against you. So these are the general outcomes you might come to, right? So if you're denied the credit, you want to see what were the reasons for the denial, come to determination, which may be of these broad categories, which we will go into in more detail for each of them, which could generally be you believe the reasons are valid. So what can we do if that is the case? You're saying, okay, I could see why they denied the credit. I believe they applied the same standards to everybody, and I didn't meet this particular standard. What should I do at that point in time? You are not sure if the reasons for denial are valid or invalid. So you're saying, I don't know if they applied, an equal standard to everybody and if the reasons they provided are valid or not. So did they give me the actual reasons, or were the reasons that they gave me somewhat vague, and or do I understand basically the reasons that have been applied, and are the reasons that they gave me valid? Or you could believe that the reasons for credit denial are invalid and the creditor has discriminated against you. So if we look at the reasons, they give you the reasons and you're saying, hey, that doesn't line up with, I think, the equal standards to everybody across the board, and there's something strange about this, then we'll talk more about that category. So these are the three categories. Let's look at the first one, which is probably the most common one. You believe the reasons for denial are valid, meaning you're thinking they applied the uniform standards as they applied to everyone to see whether or not someone could repay the loan. They denied the loan based on some valid reason. Obviously, if it is some valid reason, they would have to determine or tell you specifically what the reason is so that you can know exactly what it is. And hopefully at that point, then you should be able to take action on it to improve that situation or look for other financing where the standards might be different for that particular area. So you can ask the creditor if you can provide additional information or arrange alternative credit terms. So you could say, okay, well, that seems like a valid point for that particular type of credit. Are there any actions I could take at this point in time, or is there some alternative form of credit, some other kind of financing that we can do at that point that can work around that particular problem? So apply with another creditor whose standards may be different. So the next step would be, let's go somewhere else. And note that if you're in a market where there's multiple people in it, which hopefully is the case where there's competition for people that are giving loans, then it would be nice that you could say, okay, if I was denied here, why don't I go to another institution and take a look at their standards and see if they come out to the same kind of thing? And or, of course, if you're looking at different types of institutions, as we've seen in prior presentations, you might have different kind of loan arrangements that would be involved and different standards that could be involved as well. So you can go back to like the hierarchy of the costs of loans and what types of loans might be available at that point. So take steps to improve creditworthiness. So obviously at that point, you should be able to say, okay, you denied the credit, you told me exactly what it is, and now I can work on that thing most likely to try to improve it. So the common types of things would of course be to increase income, which usually mean you would be more likely to be able to pay the loan payments. So if you're somehow able to increase income, reduce spending so that you could show that your monthly payments, you're clearing the expenses by a larger margin, that might be good for that debt payment ratio. Pay bills on time. So clearly if it's a credit worthiness kind of situation, your credit's not as good as it could be or something like that, then you want to make sure that you're paying the bills on time and possibly increase the credit score. And whatever the condition is, if you know exactly what it is and you ask them, how can I improve that certain thing, then you should be able to focus in on that and improve it possibly, and then reapply for the loan, or say, hey, look, I need the loan now. What are my other options either at this institution or other institutions? So on the second question, you might say, hey, you're not sure if the reasons for denial are valid or invalid. And that might be the case that they gave you vague information. And this is a type of information it's just like when you ask anybody for feedback and they say, I'm doing this, I'm denying you this, or this, I'm doing something that you don't like, or something, I don't like what you're doing, and I ask why, and the answer is basically because I said so, because I said so, or something like that. Well, that's a vague reason. I don't know if that's a valid reason or not, or if there's some valid reason behind. I know that's not a valid reason because you didn't tell me anything. You just basically, you have no standards at all. You just basically said just because I said so. That's not a reason. So, right, you got to have uniform reasons across the board. So what you could do at that point, right, if you don't know whether or not it's a valid reason or not, is then you want to make sure to clarify the reason. If so, they should give you the reasons for why they denied financing. And then if we don't get that, then we want to ask for the reasons why the financing was denied. And then basically, if it's not clear, if they give you a vague reason, then of course we want to see if we can get further clarification. And if we don't understand the reason, then of course we want to see if we can get further clarification either from the institution and or from our own research about that particular thing, and then we can take the steps from there to determine if that reason is valid within the law and equal application of the law, possibly then even looking at it, comparing it to other financial institutions. And like I say, if there's another institution that basically is close by and in competition, and we think there's something that may or may not be valid in that, then that's the way you can one way you can measure it. If there is no other financial institution, if competition for whatever reason is not there for financing of that particular sort in one area, that's when problems often occur because you don't have the competition. So then it's harder to see whether or not the business is working and applying standardized policies and so on and so forth. So that consolidation of power, bad stuff. So it may believe the reasons for credit denial are invalid and the creditor has discriminated against you. So if you come to the determination, hey, look, the reason you gave me isn't valid, it doesn't seem like you're applying a uniform application, and or the whatever you applied is not in alignment with the law, then you can take action from that point in time. And again, even if you're at this point, then the question at that point would be, well, what's the best scenario for me to take action here and get the loan from this institution? Or again, I would think if you could try another institution just to prove that fact to you, to be able to go somewhere else and say, is this other institution coming up with the same information? And that might more validate your case, and then possibly go forward with the case just out of principle at that point in time. But you might be able to do that double verification if there's some other institution that would have the same standards or similar standards, and just see what the comparison would be if that was to be an option, and then take action. And then again, when you take action on this, you may be able to provide pressure to the institution, and you could come out with a beneficial result just simply from the pressure, where the institution might be, might say, okay, I'd rather, do something other than get into a litigation lawsuit, whether it be right or not, or whether they think they should be arguing it or not. So but it could also be a costly kind of move as well, depending on how you would go forward to put pressure on the institution. So one way you can notify the federal enforcement agencies whose name you were given. The federal enforcement agency will investigate and report back. So if you do that route, then it could be a way to provide pressure in such a way that it doesn't cost you much, right, to do that, because you're not actually hiring the lawyer in that way. And if they can apply pressure to the financial institution and get a loan, you might be able to get a loan, at that point, or the more expensive option would be to hire a private attorney to file suit against the creditor, because that usually will mean that you're probably paying the attorney whether or not they win or lose the case. And if they lose the case, then you could end up sinking money into it. If you win the case, then it could be a beneficial thing. So that's a more risky kind of situation, you would think. So if the court finds discrimination, the creditor must pay you actual damages plus punitive damages. So obviously, if you win the case, then it could be a beneficial thing. Everybody wins. Obviously, the lawyer wins either way. So the lawyer is the only big winner, no matter what happened. But in any case, that would mean that that they would have to pay out and hopefully pay the damages of the cost of the lawyer and so on, and then punitive damages to try to get the institution to punish them, in essence, to change their behavior in the future, generally punitive damages.